So sparks flew during a recent exchange on the Fox Propaganda Network when a Democratic strategist made a really important point that a Trump-aligned Fox News host did not want to hear about the situation at the southern border. But before we dive into the clips and the substance, I want to introduce my friend and yours, Luke Beasley of The Luke Beasley Show. What's going on, Luke?
Jessiah, great as always to be with you. Looking forward to talking about quite the story today.
Likewise. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and play the clip so you can get some context, and then we'll unpack it together.
It's a stunning, stunning report. Let's bring in Clay Travis. Thank you very much, Bill Maluzhin, as we wait for Kamala Harris to land in Arizona. Let's bring in Clay Travis, Outkick founder, and Jose Aristimuño, former DNC deputy press secretary and co-host of Americano Media. Great to have both of you with us. Jose, these are awful numbers. I'm sure that you don't want to know that some of these 13,000 who have committed murder or 15,000 who have committed sexual assault are in your neighborhood or anywhere near your family.
Yeah, look, it's a real problem, and it's so sad to see, and I can tell you, me as a Venezuelan American, when I see Donald Trump insult Venezuelan immigrants, insult Haitian immigrants, to say that they're doing a bunch of things that a majority of immigrants are good serving people. Martha, the FBI says it, releases reports year after year. Less than 10% of undocumented immigrants are criminals.
People who commit homicides. He's talking about people who commit sexual assault.
But to say that Venezuelans. But
no,
what's the solution? But what is the solution? Mass deportation. They want to deport people that look like me simply because you are Latino. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, the first day that Joe Biden got sworn into office, he put forth an immigration bill, and Republicans blocked it. What happened with the border bill a couple of months ago? Donald Trump called Speaker Johnson and said, "Kill the bill."
And I want to go to Clay, but
that's just a reality.
It is reality. It's also reality that the president can close the border. That executive orders that they put in June made a huge difference.
There's an executive order right now that does just that.
The president has authority on some things. Clay, you go ahead. I can tell you're champing at the bit to get in, and that's why we brought you here, so please do.
Martha, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Did Jose just say it's Donald Trump's fault that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have let in 13,000 known murderers and 16,000 known
you know
rapists?
It's true.
With all due respect, this is the dumbest argument ever made in the history of Fox News, at least while I've been a guest. Look, the reality is Trump is right. We are
you got no. Well, tell me the counterpart. Tell me the counterpart argument. You got nothing.
All right, I let you talk, Jose. Please let Clay talk now, but there's nothing funny here. Go ahead, Clay.
We know that many of these countries barely convict anyone of murder or rape. What are the chances if you are a drug-dealing criminal in Mexico that you get convicted of murder? This is by itself reason enough. Kamala Harris should resign, and shame unacceptable.
I apologize. We have breaking news.
Well, that certainly got heated a little bit. So we have Martha MacCallum there, Clay Travis. These are two people who have featured prominently in previous videos of mine. Martha MacCallum, of course, a conservative Fox News host, one of the more respectable ones, even though she is, of course, pretty openly in Trump's orbit. Clay Travis, considerably less so. This guy is a diehard MAGA Republican. Did not appreciate that fact check about how the situation at the southern border is really a bipartisan one, Luke. I mean, for context, this ICE report dropped detailing, and it's pretty sobering, that there are more than 13,000 migrants in this country awaiting deportation who either here or abroad have been convicted of homicide. I understand why people would have serious concerns about that. But Clay Travis and Fox News seem to want you to believe that that is entirely a situation which created out of nowhere under the Biden administration, and Donald Trump is perfect and flawless.
Yeah, and because this has become so partisan, and the priority is all about the politics of it, and not actually the people of it, the solutions, they end up throwing things in this conversation that create a debate like what you just saw there. No progress is made, shouting happens, and they want to point with the assumption of bad intentions at Biden-Harris for any of the problems relating to our southern border or immigration system at large, when in reality, as you said, this didn't come out of nowhere. Many of the people we're talking about now, as was pointed out in some reporting after this ICE report, actually could have entered the country illegally while Trump was president. And whatever you feel about the blame, can't we just talk about solutions? But of course, it was Donald Trump who got Republicans to shoot down that once-in-a-generation border security bill, a bill that would have addressed many of the problems they're screaming about. But explicitly, Trump wants to run on a problem instead of talking about the solution. And then, Jessiah, it's interesting. You know that chart that Trump says, "Oh, I wanna go to sleep and hump that chart," because that he hair hugged because he looked at it whenever the assassination attempt happened, and that could have saved his life. But the actual chart that he's referring to, that he's very proud of because of how it shows a big spike in border crossings under Biden-Harris, they put noticeably the arrow right at the 2020 pandemic dip that happened because of the pandemic, not because of border policies. But what they didn't actually accurately do is put the arrow when Trump actually left office, which is when we were seeing an unprecedented spike in border crossings, illegal border crossings, as Trump was leaving office. That's the trend, the trajectory that he left for Biden-Harris, and then it continued up, to be sure. So regardless of the screaming and the partisanship, can we just talk about solutions? And that's what it seems at Vice President Harris's border visit. She's acknowledging there are problems. She's acknowledging, you're right, we should not have people in the country illegally who have these sorts of criminal records. In the very report, sorry, just I'm going on for quite some time.
No, go ahead.
The very ICE report that Fox News is freaking out about, it actually does document DHS's efforts to solve the problem, the advances they're making, the progress they're making on that front to find and then deport the very people that are being fear-mongered about. But who is it? This is the question you have to ask, talking about solutions. Who's just fear-mongering about the problem? Harris just had that border visit where she's talking about the solutions as well as acknowledging the problem, whereas Trump just likes to scream about the problem.
No, I think that you hit the nail on the head, and there's so much there to unpack. I think it is worth noting because, of course, people will say, some people, centrists and conservatives, they'll like, listen, you guys are liberals, you all are progressives, you all are openly in the bag for Democrats. Donald Trump, of course, Donald Trump had nothing to do with sabotaging a relatively conservative bipartisan border bill. So I do this every time this claim comes up, and I feel like we got to roll the tape here. I just want to play you a quick montage of Trump-aligned Republicans confirming explicitly that Donald Trump did indeed kill that bill. So let's just roll the tape.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump. And the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that, on net, significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that, that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you.
But I would acknowledge President Trump failed, along with Republicans, Paul Ryan and the guys. They failed in 2018 to actually move a border security bill to tighten this so that we weren't dealing with this crisis right now. They failed to actually get the wall built. President Trump signed 12 continuing resolutions after he said he would never sign another one if they didn't give him the money to finish building the wall. Look, this stuff matters. It adds up. I call balls and strikes. This is not hard.
The Speaker says that if one migrant comes across the border, that's one migrant too many, and your bill doesn't do enough to completely shut down the border.
Actually, it does completely shut down the border in many ways.
And then, of course, Luke, you also mentioned that the vice president had an excellent speech yesterday about the situation at the southern border. It got rave reviews from everybody other than Donald Trump. And to your point, she says this, she illuminated that stark contrast where she wants to resolve the issue. Number one, she acknowledges that there is a problem, which many people thought that would be politically disadvantageous to her. Like, oh, you can't admit that there's a serious problem on your watch. But she actually does acknowledge it, and she's acknowledged it for months. And I also say this, listen, if you want to make the claim that Democrats of the Biden-Harris administration were perhaps too slow to publicly acknowledge the issues at the southern border. I think that's a good faith criticism to make, Luke, but here's the difference, and this is something I feel like we really need to focus on. When the time came, Democrats and the White House, in good faith, negotiated. And I would argue, many progressives would argue, they gave the farm away to Republicans. That's how generous they were. That bipartisan border bill was relatively conservative. James Langford was the primary architect of this, a conservative Republican Trump endorsed for his hawkish views at the southern border. That was why so many progressives critiqued the border bill. So it's not like it was this, full-blown liberal wish list or any stretch of the imagination. I would argue conservatives got much more of what they wanted than liberals, and that's why the Trump-loving, Biden-hating Border Patrol Union endorsed that bill, Luke. So basically, when the time came, they were absolutely eager to see resources surge to fortify this in federal law, because judges are less likely to strike down federal law compared to presidential executive orders. So they were basically trying to give it the silver bullet. And as we played in that montage, Trump deliberately killed it. He killed that bill to do exactly what Clay Travis and Fox News are doing right now, Luke. Isn't it? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Trump right now is trying to exploit this report, which, as we say, includes migrants who were eligible for, deportation and who entered the country under the Trump administration as well. And this report goes into, and the letter associated with the report as well, goes into detail about how they are strapped for resources, how they try to prioritize these concerns, but because of the limited resources, because of the lack of legislative reinforcement, this is where we are. And so I find it so frustrating that there are good faith criticisms to make of both the Democrats and the Republicans on this issue. But you have Fox and Republicans trying to strip the whole thing of nuance and say it's one side's fault 100%. I just don't know how we get past that.
Well, and again, politics would make absolutely no sense if all we did was scream about the problems. Because you got to acknowledge them first, but almost any person can acknowledge problems. That's super, super duper easy. It's crafting the solutions in politics that is the whole game. That's the whole hard part. And so what is not acknowledged either is the progress that has been made. Interestingly, billionaire Mark Cuban has really been an advocate for Vice President Harris in recent weeks. And one of the points he made, I think on social media, was to all the people screaming that this is the reason Harris should not be elected. Can you at least grapple with the fact that we've seen this sharp decline in border crossings after some of the executive actions that Biden took supported by Harris? And imagine if those actions had such an impact, I think in July, getting down to lower border crossings than when we saw when Trump was leaving office.
Correct.
If those had that impact, imagine the impact actual, like you said, ironclad legislation could have. But I get that there are some people on the quote-unquote left who probably weren't on board with any solutions and aren't that serious about taking the problem seriously. So I am perfectly willing to criticize people. I can tell you, though, Vice President Harris is not one of those people, given the solution she's putting forward. All I've heard Trump say is we're going to go back to what I was doing that worked so well, even though, as I said, the 1 year they say was working so well is the year that no one wanted to enter because of how bad the pandemic was raging in the sort of freeze on migration. So it's a simple contrast. It's perfectly acceptable for people to have criticisms of people who are currently in power. That's usually how it works. But first, let's understand the historical perspective. As you said, how many of these individuals were already in the United States when Trump was president? It's not a new phenomenon that some percentage, even if it's a problem, some percentage of legal and illegal immigrants are going to commit crimes, and that's the people who are prioritized for deportation, as they should be. But if the resources to do so are the problem, and obviously, then let's talk about that instead of just fear-mongering or doing the Trump thing where you scream about Hannibal Lecter.
No, 100%. Donald Trump and the Republicans helped create a problem. They identified the problem. They've been using it as a cudgel to hurt Democrats, to scapegoat and make all kinds of bigoted, xenophobic remarks about an entire class of people, which is making the situation dramatically worse, in addition to just being profoundly inhumane. And the Fox Propaganda Network, I would argue, is just signal boosting this. Again, it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Last thing I'll say, just to really drive this point home, after the good faith, bipartisan negotiated bill, which again was relatively conservative, failed, President Biden broke the glass in case of emergency and issued executive orders, which may very well, and this is really important because some people will say, well, Luke, Jessiah, why didn't Biden just do that to begin with? Because executive orders are by far the most vulnerable to being overturned by judicial review. It happened repeatedly under the Trump administration. Donald Trump had many of his own immigration/border related executive orders overturned by even conservative judges and justices. It happened. That is precisely what Biden wanted to avoid. And so the fact of the matter is he took action, and we are seeing a precipitous decline in undocumented contacts at the southern border. So again, at the end of the day, you have two choices. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
And can I just, because I missed one of the points that I wanted to make. It's difficult with these discussions. Sometimes we fall into accepting, just for the sake of the argument, their premises a little bit too aggressively, and then I have regret about it. So let me just make sure we contextualize. While my point's true that some percentage, that's going to happen. It happened under Trump. It happened under Obama. You're going to have criminal records. Like I said, our government prioritizes those individuals for deportations. But remember, just for the sake of accuracy, undocumented and legal immigrants do have much lower rates of criminality compared to citizens who are what was it? U.S. born citizens,
right? U.S. born citizens. Yeah.
I only say that so that we don't allow the problem to be blown out of proportion, even if it is one. That all immigrants are blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is what we're seeing is for a long time we've heard rhetoric that goes way too far and is way too dehumanizing about undocumented immigrants. Even if we're going to enforce border laws, you don't have to have inhumane policies. Right now, what we're seeing, though, is the expansion using stories like this one with no interest of actually addressing the problem to justify dehumanization, demonization of all immigrants, including lawful immigrants, which quite literally have made this country what it is. So there are so many parts of this because we want to talk about, yes, we do want to deport the individuals in this report who have these criminal records, and still, that doesn't justify some of the inhumane policies people want to justify with it as it pertains to undocumented immigrants. And we can't allow the rhetoric about that to cause people to lose sight of the beauty of lawful immigration.
No, I think that's so important. Again, it's one of those things where, because I'm also, while you were talking, and I'm sure your mind went there too, what Trump and J.D. Vance are saying about the Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, right? So it's like all of this just flows in together, and it just speaks to the bad faith and xenophobia, which is really metastasized within elected Republican politicians. And then, of course, what Clay Higgins had to say, that Republican representative, oh my God, we could just keep going on and on and on about this. But anyway, you will no doubt hear about this stunning ICE report. Just remember that there is important context to this, and only one political party is actually working to address it. That's the Democratic Party, and the other party is trying to demagogue it and exploit it for purely political purposes. So with that in mind, Luke, where can people find you, sir?
You can find me at Luke Beasley on YouTube, and even with such a topic as this one, I really do enjoy chatting about it with you, Jessiah.
Likewise. I appreciate it, buddy.